Well, your story, I just immediately thought about when we were up. So I'm working on my first feature-length documentary, and so we were up for a trip in September, and fire season was still in full swing, mid to late September, and we were told that there was a crew there from the States that was assisting into this area that we were wanting to go and film in, and we were there with environmental monitors and Sikas Nation, where it's like a whole bunch of natives, and on their land, on Sikas land, and we're driving down this road and we get to their checkpoint, and I'm sitting there and I'm just like, oh, this is not right. This is Sikas land. We're getting to these spaces that are like where the culture camp happens, where it's like, but it was an interesting interaction because the monitors are just like really calm and just like you mentioned, I don't know how it was handled, but it was handled really well. And it was actually it was a respectful exchange, but nevertheless, I just had this moment of just like this feeling of anger but I don't live up there. I'm not living that day-to-day reality that folks in the community are. So I need to step back and I need to just listen and really and check in really closely with what the community is saying and doing and take that lead. But I think this is our third trip. We've been working on this film for 3.5 years, and the grief really hit me this time because the fires had completely wiped out this one section of Sikas territory where the culture camp was. We're just this really important area of the territory. And I had been there. I'd been there in the last few years, and I had seen the beauty of this place, and then just to see it completely gone just filled me with incredible sadness. And this is what we've been documenting with the film, and the way in which all the conversations that we had with folks in community, both in the leadership and grassroots and in the community, I was really struck by the words that they shared about this, because everybody was grieving, everybody was feeling that loss, but they were also really clear about these are our lands that are hurting right now, and we're gonna figure out a way that we're going to nurture them and to be here for them. And we talked a lot about the kind of trees that were going to be planted, that were going to be fire resistant, and the ones that were going to benefit from being planted in these areas. And one of the folks in the Lands and Resource Office also talked about in order to deal with this, she was really looking at it as a cleansing of the land. And I just thought, wow, this is just such powerful examples of the work that endures, that continues. And when we talk about story, I feel like I'm a story lover. And I suppose I see my role as documenting, and documenting in a way that is deeply respectful and connected to the people whose lands we are on, and that means looking at it from these very different perspectives, because it's not just devastation and destruction. These are still the places that we have traveled through for millennia, and they're the places that we are not abandoning, that we are continuing to live on.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, I'll just
Thank
leave
you.
it at that.
Rosemary, before I'm going to get you to talk, we have another guest if you didn't notice. yourself into the room. And our topic is air today, so it is stories and dream time.
All right. Haitaka. So I am the and the Skaklia to leads in Atla Kumasque Mastama, then a tenth of the Mark with Fanaman after Tamkitiem, Fanamamana, a Komora, a Almu, Sophia, a Hoya, Lanshwalakwa Iati, a Poetin, a Kilinagus, a Tanshkoloin, Haitaka to a Musteo, E to E. Good day, my honored and respected friends. My name is Skaklia. My English name is Christy Charles, and I come from where we're gathered today, from the unceded territories of the Musqueam people, with lineages to Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh as well. I have a very big family. I'm a mother of 4. I brought 2 of my little ones here today, and my family, Poetin, is here from Musqueam as well, and my partner, Kilinagus, is here out, running around with the baby still. So that's how we roll across the land, though, and through the air and the waters. It's so beautiful to be here, and connected to the air, it was so beautiful to be a part of last night. And the conversations that were around water last night, because it's all connected, right? Everything is connected, and just talking about air and the journey to get here. I was reflecting on earlier in the day. I was reflecting on the topic, and we were all sitting talking about it because we're talking about coming here and coming to the event today. My home is on Musqueam Indian Reservation, but it's also on this old village of Skilech and this archaeological wet site and all these different layers of history. Now we live there, but the trees just started blowing around and talking about last night how we can identify the land and the waters and the creatures and the birds and the bees, and sure enough, there's everything's buzzing around. I'm so thankful to live, in this city, but a little piece of Musqueam on this tiny little, reservation on our traditional territory. It's still a nice place where, all of our creatures live and our people live, and looking up at the gray clouds and the wind moving the clouds and bringing the white clouds and the blue sky, and then and even just driving here, we're turning left to come into downtown, and a crow just kind of flew right and glided right in front of us to land on the piece of grass along the sidewalk, and just noticing the way its wingtips split, and it just had a little branch in his mouth too, actually. And just being able to see that and have that connection, and just be thankful for the air that we breathe and the cedar trees that provide us with that oxygen, and we feed it back, and it feeds the earth, and we were talking last night, the salmon and the ground, and the next generation. It's funny how I was on Amazon looking for a jerry stripper so I can weave my cedar, because we don't have access to our traditional, ways of making our traditional tools anymore. So so everything's connected, and I was also mentioning to my family I can talk about a little bit about our creation story, and how Chels in our Hunkaminam ways. Jeez, you guys are lucky to hear all these stories, hey? How Chels was the one who, in our teaching, it's the creator, the great transformer. And Chel sent us the first people, the beginning of people, from the skies down to this earth wrapped in clouds, right? And we were sent as caretakers and instructors of these lands, and we have transformation powers and magical powers and all these things that we can still carry today. but it's reconnecting through the air, through the land, through the water. It's kind of hard to do it in this city, especially coming down here, right? Seeing all our people on the street because they're disconnected from the land, they're disconnected from the air, the water, the resources, right? And I'm lucky I get to go home and reconnect, to disconnect, right? So, yeah, I'm just really thankful. Yeah, and I just heard this really neat perspective from Brandon Gabriel. He's a Kwantlen artist, a Salish artist. But he was saying how, like, we love to do what we do, and we're so honored that we get to come and share, but we're actually, like, taking away from our families, right? I'm spending my time to come away. Half my family's at home right now, right? And half my family's here. But also, like, in the work that we do, for reconciliation, for climate change, for decolonizing and relearning, is we have to be disconnected from our land, from our family, in order to reconnect and to teach, other people, not from our societies, not from our communities, to help understand our communities so we can go back to our kids and make sure that they have, a great path. So there's those times where we need the air to just breathe and
Thank you.
keep going. Yeah,
Beautiful.
it's so good.
So we're talking about how stories, and in these unprecedented times right now, that and overwhelming for all the different things around, how do you navigate all that you carry, grief, anger, how do you navigate that, Rosemary?
I go home. I'm not from the city. I'm from a small island. And I was born here. I was taken back home to where my family has been through colonial history over 160 years, but through our home ancestry, we've been there thousands of years. I grew up on that same land that holds the stories of my ancestors, my family. I grew up in the Bay, where so many of them were born, raised, lived their lives on top of their village site. And I find if I stay in the city too long, and I spend so much time walking on pavement and cement, that my stories get thin, they disappear. But I go home to my island, and I go back down into that place where we've always been, and I can feel the stories coming back. It's like they come up out of the land to meet me and tell me that they're here. We've been waiting for you. And they share the stories come back. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a universal medicine, 7 universal medicines that we all carry across our different cultures, and it's singing, storytelling, connecting to nature, we all do that, laughter, food, some sort of ceremony or meditation, whatever that looks like. And there's maybe, did I say dance? Singing, dancing, no, movement. And I think about those places in which, brings solace and brings meaning to some of the what we are working with in these times, I think about that. I wonder if you could tell me, if you could tell me a piece of wisdom that you were given when you were whatever age, but a really important piece that was shared with you, and then a piece of wisdom that you would share, that you would pass forward. And anyone can go first. You just got the look, I think.
Okay. It's hard because, like, that's all that I feel that I do in a way. Like I was saying last night, and like conversations that I've been having, like just with within my daily life, is like you know, our family, like the lineage in which I come from. I was asked the question of like, oh, don't you guys have a family smokehouse, right? And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, well, we never really did that, right? And I spoke about it a little bit last night, saying how, you know, our like each person within our community, we all carry different gifts, right? Like keepers of the fire, or, you know, medicine people, and, you know, and it's even like, there's so many important things, like the ones who took care of the rain, and like, you know, there's all these different kinds of things that we forget because colonization, we just think like, oh, we were berry pickers and weavers and, you know, fishermen. Like, no, we were, you know, there's, you know, hundreds of things, gifts that we carry, because we acknowledge like the littlest things to the grandest things. And yeah, in my family, like we pass down teaching and ceremonial practices and just ways of being on the land. Like those are the kinds of things that we shared. And you know, and our people, you know, we lived in a community, like we all took care of each other, right? Like we get, you know, fish dropped off, or we get clams dropped off, and like I'm still thankful there's people in our community that do that for my family still. But yeah, and then just looking at the role that I carry today, just like, you know, I'm not just a storyteller or an MC or a panelist, and it's like it's just who I am as a Homasquim Slane, like as a Musqueam woman from these lands, just always like, you know, adding to the power of change, to the power of knowledge, to who we are as people. And then one thing that our granny, the appointance grandmother Mary Charles, shared with me that I always share, because we're still at the tip of learning and we always have to explain everything. We can't just get into anything we always have to tell our stories sometimes at events before we can really get into what we're talking about, because, you know, everybody's still learning about, you know, land acknowledgements and territories and language and all that kind of stuff. So I started doing welcomes and greetings and prayers with our grandmother Mary Charles when I was really young, and she brought me into this and taught me how to do this, and then kind of took over. My dad would share the language with me, and I would introduce her, and I'd say like, welcome to Coast Salish territories, and then she corrected me. She said, oh, Christy, you can't say that. She said, you have to be specific on the land and where you are. And my grandma, you know, she knew a lot, but she couldn't speak her language, so she'd like encourage me, like, you know, go learn the name of the land that you're on, right? So I go into the books and the archives and be like, oh, we're on Almayuk today, or we're at Sanok, Kitsilano Beach, or we're at, you know, Temtemtumuk, Burnaby Mountain, and really, because our land remembers, the air remembers, everything remembers. So it's like also the identification of like colonization. So there's like the language maps, the archaeological terminology, you know, linguist terminology is Coast Salish, like that's how they're identifying us. But it's a whole big grouping of people, right? Like me and you, we're Coast Salish, and because the different waterways and the different, you know, down in Washington, Oregon, Vancouver Island, you know, the little islands, up the Fraser Valley, up, you know, past Whistler Mountain, like we're all Salish, right? So when I say, you know, welcome to Coast Salish territory, I'm saying all those people come from my one little village here in Vancouver, right? So that's one teaching, is just unlearning how to share and identify in our way and in the Quinitan way.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to mention that I teach Can you say the name of Burnaby Mountain again?
Well, one part of it's called Etuaptmumk.
Temtemtach.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I am working hard to learn these specific names as well, and I teach my students. Like last week we did this. I said we travel through so many different people's lands, and we need to learn them. And so I make them memorize them and then practice saying it to each other. The lands of the campuses, the SFU campuses. I said, don't be lazy. There's no reason to be lazy. And I learned too, because I was heading up to what we now know as Ladner. It's currently known as Ladner. And I was looking up, I'm like, and I saw on one of the maps that it's lots of different nations, but also in the anglicized version is Shemanis, but Stismus. I was trying to learn that as well. It's a little bit of a challenging one. But I'm like, oh yeah, that would make sense, because it's just across the Salish Sea, and they would have come across. So it's, I think.
Yeah, we just were in court last week for that.
Well, I'll withdraw the last statement. But I think but paying attention to those things and really, and that is why I actually do really seek people out when I travel and have multiple conversations, because there are so many things that we do not know, and maybe we're not meant to know it. Maybe we don't need to know that as well. Like there's knowledge that's also for the community and for the family, but something else to remember. So, I'll just share that so maybe two things. One, I often reflect on something that my grandma knew her as Grandma Alu, which means, Alu means mum in our Athas and Dene language. So she was grandma mum, she was grandma to many, mum to many. And she used to say that the earth will take care of itself. The earth is going to take care of itself. And part of me was like, but we need to get out there. We need to do things. We need to and actually over time, and as I actually heard another elder also share that, a similar kind of teaching around that, and I realized that it wasn't about not doing something. It was that these processes that are happening, like the earth will find a way to, as I mentioned earlier, that kind of cleansing. And so I've often thought about that and let that guide me through some of the work that I've been doing. But when my dad became chief of our community in 2013, some of the work that he was involved in and initiated, he was first of all building off of so much incredible work that had been done since our communities sort of were coalesced around these kind of Indian communities. And those themselves built on our connection and history to that place that had gone on for many thousands of years before that. So building upon all of this work, my dad, started instituting these language programs and connecting elders with youth and, looking at our traditional medicines and setting up programs where we could have people who wanted to learn about hunting could go out with a hunter, and doing a lot of these things. And one of his big objectives was for us to get our own school in our community, because he just looked at the little ones and thought, that's where we need to start, right from there on up. And that's a tough go to get a school in a community of 300 people. But nevertheless, that was what he fought for a long time. And there was one thing I was sharing earlier with Rosemary that my dad used to say, and he said this again recently, but he said, the cavalry is not riding over the mountain to come and rescue us. He loves saying this. And basically he means nobody's gonna come and do this for us. We need to do these things ourselves. And ultimately, if we can't get funding for this, we just need to continue to do this. And it's where I find a lot of the power and the beauty is in this revitalization as well that I'm seeing of families bringing back ceremony. We have bigger potlatches that have been going on, but we also have families that are starting to bring back these different ways that we always used to have. And I think, that's really, it's so wise, like when you're talking about your family being there, like it's just, that's what we've done this whole time, and that's what we will continue to do. And I felt like there was something else.
What's the gift? What's your gift forward on that? With that?
Yeah, my mind is just drawn a blank.
We can come back.
But we can come back. That would be good.
Why not?
It'll come to me.
Or not, and
And we can move on. Thank you. I'll see.
I was just thinking about what you were sharing, Christy, about how we didn't have names, the bigger names. We had a name for that place. That's all we needed to know. My daughter has gone back, she's studying, taking Ho'okaminum over in Vancouver Island. So the name places are coming back. Not the whole name that people, the colonized name of it, where I'm from, but the places that we know. One of the first teachings I got when I was young, starting out on the boats back in the 60s, my father knew that all 4 of his kids were going to be fishermen. There was no doubt about that. That's all we ever did. But the first thing he started teaching us was no fear. Remember back in the 80s that became a popular saying, and it was out there, no fear, have no fear? Well, that was a little late. We've been doing that for thousands of years, no fear. Because that was, it was our survival. Because the first thing that happens to you on the water and you develop fear, or anywhere, it can kill you. And my dad wanted us all to come home. So have no fear. And that's something that's always stayed with me because I knew it was about our survival and to keep moving forward. And I've done the same thing with my daughters. I have 3 daughters, and it's always been the same thing, no fear. And they've gone out and spent time and worked out on the boats too. Well, my youngest one, not so much. And I think we're in that place again where we have to have no fear because it's our survival. To keep taking our knowledge and using it and moving forward with it in a time where we've been so impacted by colonization, assimilation, murdered and missing, residential school, and we're still moving forward. I think that's the no fear. And it comes through, all of us just sitting here sharing stories to people that we can't see out there. But we aren't afraid. We keep moving forward. We keep doing this work that we all do in uncertain, crazy times. And we're fighting things that our people have fought for generations behind us. We're still going forward. Yeah. Thank you.
thank you. So it's an interesting one when I think of, human interaction, right? And I think of our families and family dinners. And for me, I think of like when Aunt Zeddy shows up and I'm like, oh no, what is she gonna do this year? And it's always awkward and uncomfortable and really funny afterwards, maybe sometimes but yet there's a teaching in that, right? In that kind of thing. And I think we, in a society here and on this territory, when we talk about family and connection and probably even disconnection, I would say, there's a disconnection in the chaos that we're in, you know, and what would your ask be? What would your ask be to create that place? I don't want to say woo-woo harmony, that's not the word I'm looking for, but I'm looking for solidarity, I guess would be the word. And what does solidarity mean in this time when we have so much like access to everything, really? You know, it's unprecedented. You're gonna go first this time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this connects to, popped into my head what I was actually gonna say in response to the moving things forward. I feel like my own journey with my nation and my community over the last couple of years as I've been making this film has reconnected me in really profound ways, not just through the ceremony that brought me back into our clan system, but through being able to hear these stories, to develop these stronger family and community connections, and to learn more about the history of our lands and the relationships that we have with all of those surrounding the people that are surrounding us, and the possibility that is present in those relationships. So one of the stories that I heard is actually the origin of our clan system, and it's the origin of how each of those animals came to be. And what it actually originates in is something that had happened, a very violent incident that happened to a community member. And that community member reached out and said, this has happened to me, this has happened to my wife and my son, and I need help. I need to rectify this. I need to respond to what has happened. And so these different folks came together and they were like, okay, how are we going to work together to seek a remedy to this? And they realized they needed certain strengths. And some people had the strengths of swimming, and they were and others had the strengths to climb the mountain, and others had different strengths. So this is how Caribou Clan and Frog Clan and Bear Clan and how the clans came together. And I just thought, this is because this is also what we've been talking about in terms of politically and on a number of different levels, how we're going to move forward is through these historical alliances, these alliances that made us really strong. And so I feel like we have that within, we have these mechanisms, these diplomatic things that we have always practiced, and those are going to be what is going to actually create those alliances to move forward. And I think it's really the only way. I feel like that knowledge, that wisdom is going to be the deciding factor as we move forward. And I see slow up in the North Interior anyways, slow recognition. It's painfully slow. But for example, our regional district has supported our nations in one of our court cases against industry. They were and that's never happened before. That's never happened. So there's just this recognition that we actually, our stewardship, our guardianship is going to be what will be the pathway through all of these overlapping crises that we're facing.
Thank you.
So much to think of, we have to just everything connects, right? And it has me thinking about my late father and how he was a storyteller, and he's the one who introduced me to a lot of our cultural ways, and thinking about the little stories that are within our communities, within our nations, and for example, there's a grouping of stories from Musqueam, like these 16 short stories that were documented. And when you read each story, it has a teaching within it, right? Like a teaching for, you know, how to carry yourself, or, you know, how to protect yourself, or help yourself out in a situation. And then when you piece those stories together, they all connect to the next story somehow. And then just thinking about like how the disconnect you talked about, like even within, you know, so I'm so happy to say, like, yeah, I brought my family here, and like, you know, I'm so thankful. I was just having this conversation this morning, like how thankful I am to have my little family, right? But we come from larger families, and you know, we don't always get along, and and some of those tools are things that were taken from us, right, and taught to us through the colonial system, and you know, yeah, and just like generational effects of those are still very, very present and very, very heavy today, right? Like I just always stay in prayer and thankful, and I was lucky, you know, I'm lucky. I have like culminates privilege in a way where I got to spend time with my dad, and you know, he always went to our elders for language stories, and then my mom was the elders center worker, so I always got to travel with them, you know, and go on their trips and go for tea and go for breakfast, and then just like some of the jobs I had growing up, you know, summer jobs, working in the archives, or working in, you know, on a documentary project, or you know, and even working with Rosemary, and you know, the project we worked with, the water we call home, and like bringing us to your home and feasting off the waters and the lands there. And like, I'm just so fortunate to live in this time, and I wish that I could bring everyone along with me and be like, hey, it's gonna be okay, like, you know, like, because some of those things are what were forgotten or taken away from, you know, the love and compassion and understanding of how to connect. And you know, I'm kind of blabbering on, but just thankful that we can gather together. And my hope is, yeah, just for everyone to feel loved and cared for and not disconnected, and to find their way, because you know, we're not all the same. You know, we all have different family teachings, and even my own little, you know, me and my 4 kids, you know, we're gonna have a different way of being, you know, 20 years from now, and how we carry our teachings through the land, right? And I'm so thankful for, you know, events like this, and you know, all the different organizations that, you know, and programs and grants and communities that brought us together to be here today. And you know, arts is a good way to share, and theater and storytelling, but land acknowledgements, and you know, that's a great way to start. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg of, you know, understanding who culminates people are and how we work. And like I say, I wear many cedar hats, and one of them is I'm a consultant on a team, and one of the projects we're working on is a development of a center within the city, and there's so many different people at the table, and they're still really just stuck on public art. And I'm just like, it's not just public art. Like, you can't just put a house post and some zigzags on a wall. Like, you have to, like, it's deeper than that, and that's why I'm here. Like, I'm here to help show you and open your hearts and minds that, you know, we are architects, we are landscape artists, we know how to build structures, we know how to, you know, use the plant medicines and lay the water, and like, you know, to take care of all these things. And they're like, okay, so public art. I'm like, no. Our longhouses, you know, so our Charles Longhouse is, one of our Charles Longhouse is like one of the biggest documented homes on this land, and they have house boards out at UBC, and they have professors teaching and studying, and you know, there's people have written their papers about like how big the house was, and how the fire pit was laid out, and you know, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, and just like how Audrey said, like like, you know, we've known these ways since time immemorial, but yet we have science and scholars and, you know, developers saying like, oh, isn't that neat? We figured it out. We're like, no, we've been doing it since time immemorial, and the evidence is there, right? Like last night, Bob was saying like how they found, you know, possibly old tools on the other side of the mountain from our ancestors, and those tools, like, you could probably still use them to this day. They could be, you know, thousands of years old, but you could probably take one of those knives and slice a skin. Whereas, like, if you go to the hardware store or the dollar store, you know, those things break in a week and you have to go get another one. But yeah, I just hope that that it moves past and beyond. You know, it's in healthcare, it's in school, it's in art, it's in developing, it's in policy writing, like, yeah, so just keep growing our way, we'll find a way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The circle that Christy was talking about, the water we call home, it's an installation and it's work that I've been doing to find our family that we were all separated from. Throughout that process, I thought that they were the lost family. It was us that was lost, because we'd lost our culture, our ways of being. But the one thing we did retain was the knowledge of the water and fishing. And it was through those stories that were passed on down through the generations that we knew how to reconnect and where to start finding the family. And we started coming together and sharing stories with each other and learning how we were all connected. It rebuilt connections that were lost due to the loss of the fishing industry. As Bob was sharing last night, or Chief Bill Williams on Thursday night, that every time something is taken away from us, we lose those stories. We lose the language of how to speak it. And that's what was happening amongst our family. And with the loss of fishing, we didn't come together and share stories anymore. So another separation amongst us all. But then we started coming back together and meeting and just sitting in circles, sharing stories and reconnecting. Kimmy was present with us, Christy, some other relatives of ours. And it was through those stories that we found where we've been passing each other through the last 150, 200 years without knowing who each other was. I think that's the reconnection for me personally, the reconnection to the place of the names. Our circle, we're called Siaya Niata Sakalets. We're people of the Big Bay. We all lived around that bay out there, which you all know is the Gulf of Georgia. Those names came into being somewhere back in I think it was in the 40s. My father said that they got somebody in Quebec to name all these places out here, someone who'd never been here. The names that we'd always known were gone. This was some of the change that happened. But as we're going through doing what we're doing now, the names of the places are coming back to us. And they fill in the blanks in our stories. That's my reconnection. I think we're all feeling that way of connecting again to our land, our waters, our stories, who we are.
You kind of you already answered my last question. you know, because what keeps your hope alive? You know, what keeps your and maybe hope isn't the right word. There's probably a better word for it. You know, as a mother, you have children. you know, and that is kind of self-explanatory, I think. You know, as a grandmother, as a great-grandmother now, did you say that? Yeah.
Fish slime.
You know, and I think of, you know, as when we think of sharing knowledge and two-eyed seeing, I'll bring it back to that. I know that sometimes when I've spoken to groups of lawyers and we're talking about, well, they ask, where did it come from? Well, it came from the wind, the songs, the knowledge came from and I say spirit, for a lack of a better word. But I think about where, for each of you, you know, Christy Lee, I remember the first time I ever saw you rapping, and I was like, what? My brain was just like, couldn't figure out what was happening, because, you know, you're rapping your language, and it was on Main Street, and I was just so, like, excited, like, it lit me on fire, you know, and I think through our work of just being, you know, Rosemary, who's made me cry on many occasions, of bringing us to here, you know, into here, that, you know, there's a gift in that. So my question to you would be, when I think of the two-eyed seeing, right? When I think of the knowledge that you hold, and we talk about appropriation a lot, and how do you hold both? Anyone?
Okay. Okay, yeah, actually, I just had this conversation the other day. So.
Can I say this? Is that I was just saying, you know, my buddy Darwin Douglas, and he said, Kim, I learned very young that the words in the air when we're in the big house and first village speaks, and that's what I was gonna say. And the second village speaks, and he goes, oh, that was what I was gonna say next, and he's trying to think about what to say. And so I love how you keep on going. Oh yeah, we were already talking about that.
Wait, say that again? I just totally thought about 10,000 things.
Is how do you hold both? How do you hold?
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so it's really tough actually, like even just driving here today. I was like trying to calm down as I come here because like my house is full, and then we had to change our plans, like half the people were gonna stay, and then they're like, we're coming. I'm like, okay, let's get ready. And then and then just like always thinking about the work that we do, and then like the things I need to carry and pass on, and like it's tough because, you know, here I am living in my community, living in within my family, and then like learning who I am and connecting, you know, through the work that I do, and learning about like just our cultural ways and our history, and like, you know, new findings and new understandings, like, because, you know, there's things that, you know, I learned when I was younger that I didn't actually get until I was older, right? So you're always carrying those teachings and learning as you go, and that's our way of life. But also like coming into the colonial world, right? A lot of people in our Musqueam community talk about like Southwest Marine Drive is like, that's the invisible line where it like transforms, like it's a new portal that was created, right? Because, you know, once you go over that line, you're in Musqueam, and you're in the trees, you're at the river, you're with your people, you know, you're by your home fires, but once you cross that line, it's a whole different story. And we live in a very, you know, Dunbar Southlands neighborhood, so it's very different. You know, we're still learning and growing out our way. And so sometimes it's frustrating, right? Like sometimes like, we were talking on a panel the other day, and the day before that I was on a phone call, and I was just so tired of hearing the same thing. Like, we stand up here and we're so, like, it's in our teaching to share and always be humble and courteous, and like, it's not because colonization made us feel uncomfortable and we always have to be, you know, nice and or we're gonna get in trouble. It's our way of how we're trained as women in our community, you know, to carry those gentle teachings, to carry those kind words. And but also I was reminded, like, the name that I carry, Skachlia, it comes from some pretty powerful women in my family. And my great granny, you know, when she'd take the floor, you know, the floor is for the speakers, it's for the workers, but she was so powerful. She could go down there and she'd be like, you guys better stop doing what you're doing. And she'd like stop cultural work in the middle of its tracks, and they'd have to like figure it out, because, you know, our old people were really strict and really intense. And, you know, she'd go past, you know, go in the rooms where only certain people were supposed to gather, and she'd rush right in there and be like, you guys can't do it this way, and they'd be like, oh shit. Right? And I get that way sometimes. Like, you know, it's, you know, I'm a performer, I come out and I'll do my set, I'll tell my stories, right? But when I'm, you know, I do a lot of behind the scenes work and sit at different tables, and sometimes I'm just like, oh, you guys just aren't listening. Like, you just really don't get it. And like, I got a little bit frustrated on the phone the other day, and I think I might have said, I have sakes. Because I was just so tired of hearing it, right? Like, it's tough. But then the next day, like I said, I was on a panel, and my good friend Carrie Lynn Victor, she's so powerful. She's from up in the Fraser Valley, and she's an artist and a linguist and a transformer. Like, she's so powerful. But she reminded me of like our old people and how they'd get real stern and they'd really tell you, so you'd learn, and it'd be uncomfortable and it'd be awkward and you felt like you got in trouble. But that was the teaching that they were passing down to you, right? To be right in that way. You know, it's okay to make mistakes, but get back up there and, you know, hold yourself high and do it the right way. Because you're gonna mess it up for a whole lot of other people if you don't carry your teachings in the right way. And I've experienced that myself. But also like just putting that into the work that I do, and like just really reminding people like, hey, it's great and all, like, yeah, we had fun, and, you know, we created a cool greeting that you're gonna say, but at the same time, learn the greeting. Like, learn the name of the park that you just renamed, you know, like, how do you say, you know, like, how many people can say some of the names that have been named here in Vancouver, right? Like, and some of them are traditional names, you know, that have been restored, but some of them are like made up names, like some of the parks and the plazas and the squares and the libraries, like, you know. I love this job. I can go on. Like, I'm just getting started and it's probably unfinished. Yeah, that's all I'll say, thanks.
Thank you.
I've been so into that, I've like forgotten kind of the question, but it's like, how do we hold like hope and,
Well, you know, like, it's kind of along the two-eyed seam,
yeah,
you know? And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like, how do you hold both? How do you hold, you know, here you are
yeah,
as an Indigenous woman working in a very academic institution, colonial institution,
yeah,
right? And yeah,
Many days I want to quit. Many days. So I actually will be really honest that I have like totally shirked my community duties and my work by not being at home and not doing the work. And that's partly fear, that's partly disconnect, that's partly family dynamics. There's so much at play, right? When we're not traveling across our own homelands. And I've really tried to pay a lot of attention to my responsibilities as a guest on these lands. And I continue to do that work that's becoming like more meaningful with every, as I go on. My work has like gone from like this broad scope to like, I'm working with like Kwantlen and sometimes with Musk, I've worked with Musqueam, and I'm like working so specific because that's, it's just like, it's really important. Like there's in academia, they have these expectations that I just want to like explode, and just, you know, create these different understandings. But what has happened over the last 3 or 4 years, as I've mentioned, doing more of this work with my own nation and my own homelands, is that I have had a lot more courage to become involved in the community, and then of course being sat down in my clan, I'm like, whoa, this is different. This, like, I have a responsibility now. Like, this is not just like this is a living, breathing, ongoing. When things happen, I am expected to be there. And if I'm not there, the community is gonna know. And the next time I visit, they'll ask me about that. And so I think that, this kind of, I guess, notion of critical hope is what I connect with, because through the work, through this reconnecting, I've seen how our community is navigating these like incredibly frustrating interactions with industry, with government, and at the same time, they're also doing this really important work to build up our languages, build up our ceremonies, build up our community, occupy our lands, continue going out there. And I'm just like continually kind of in awe of that work, because it's a lot. Like, it is so much work. And that's part of what the documentary I'm doing, and I think people are really going to connect with that across. This is the like applicability across nations, is that this is what everybody is dealing with, like these incursions. And like Christy, like you said, there's like this border, like for us it's just you turn off Highway 16, go to Selenia or Gaspar, and then boom, you're there. You're in like this different space than Fraser Lake or Burns Lake or Mandarin. And it's a really beautiful place, and I just hope that kind of depth of understanding that goes beyond the performance, which the performance is really important in connecting, but to like really in a really meaningful way to understand the communities and the work that's being done is the critical hope that I hang on to.
Beautiful.
I can respond easier to questions through story. I've always been that way. I guess that's the old ones wanting their stories put out there. Years ago, when I got into this artist business, I don't know how I landed here, so yeah. I was working with Urban Ink Productions then, and my cousin would just kind of throw me out in front of people and say, here. And I was nervous. I didn't like speaking this would have been unheard of 25 years ago. And she said, no, just go. And I said, okay, well, I have this. And I was really shaky and nervous. And she said, oh, give me that. And took it away and threw it in the garbage. Just go out there and speak from your heart. Well, this is 23 years later, and that's the only way I can speak now, is, like I said, I respond to questions through story. I was thinking about, this last question that you had asked, and it took me back to a time when I was I was probably about 25, 26, and I was fishing with my father out between here and Galliano. We were about 3 miles off of the mouth of the river, and we were trolling sockeye, and the bite had dropped off. We'd lost the school, and we'd cleaned off all the lines. I'm sitting in the stern of the boat. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's hot in August. Nothing's going on, and I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and it's coming off of the Pointa in Galliano off Salamanca, which is right beside where we have to go past it to go in to tie up our boat in there. And I watched to see what this movement was on the water. Finally, it got a little bit closer, and I realized "Ah, it's a bumblebee." Well, this bumblebee had just flown, over 12 miles in the hot August sun across the water. And we were the only boat there, so of course this bumblebee is coming straight for us. He needed to rest, of course. Something as big as your thumbnail was just flowing 12 miles in a hot sun. So he lands on our boat there, and I'm sitting in the stern, and I threw out a little bit of fish guts for him. He starts eating on the fish guts that I gave him. And then Dad comes out and he says, "What are you doing?" And I pointed at the bee, and he says, "Oh, okay." And Dad goes in the wheelhouse, and he comes back with a bottle cap of water. And he says, "Here." And I put it down beside the fish guts for the bee. And the bee hangs around there for about 20 minutes or more, and I'm watching it. It's eating the fish guts. It's sitting in the bottle cap of water. The bee did what it had to do, and it got replenished, and comes up and sits on the arm of the gurdy, the lever for pulling up my lines. And, he sits there for a couple of minutes, looks at me, and I guess that was his way of saying thank you. And just buggered off and flew the rest of the way into Richmond. Now, most people can't even swim that Gulf. But I was having a conversation with our old friend Woody, and I shared this story with him. And he looks at me. Woody was an old fisherman too. He was a troller also. And he goes, "That's the magic. That's the beauty in what we do, is those moments." That's what this question made me think of, was that little bee and that moment of strength. And if that little bee can go and do something like that, like most people, they wouldn't attempt to swim across that Gulf. They'll take one of those power things, those jet skis or something. But nobody rows across there anymore. But the silence of it and the stories that are in that water and in that land on both sides of it, and what that little bee did. Total magic. I want more moments of that magic.
Me too. I'm just aware of our earthly time. And there's something, it's a cultural thing that I've learned here, is about the role of witness. And I'm going to invite our witness up today. Who's our witness? There's a mic right there. And your light is right there.
Hi. Is my mic on?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for the invitation. It's so good to be here and bear witness to your conversation. I learned something from each of you, and I so appreciate the creativity with which you express all of your ideas. Christy, it's so good to see your language and hear so much of it and see how easily it flows out of you. I'm sure it was a lot of work, but it seems so easy and effortless. And those specific, like the specific place names. And interesting for me to hear someone of our generation, we're kind of the same age, so to see someone of our generation paying so close attention to those old names and those details and the old lessons that come with them, it's very cool. Liana, your story about the cavalry, or your dad's story, I guess I should say, about the cavalry isn't coming. Man, that's so true. One of the greatest disappointments of adulthood is when you have a problem, nobody else comes to fix it for you, right? And as you were saying, the climate crisis is no different. And it was making me think of a word that's been in the air a lot recently, reconciliation, and how fundamentally impossible that seems to achieve without having first found some kind of reconciliation with the land and the water and the air that we're all sharing. And there's everybody seems confused as to where to start, but it doesn't seem like much of a mystery after hearing this conversation. That's where we should be looking. And Rosemary, I was laughing at your story about your big voice, and how you were given a big voice for the boats to be able to shout into the wind, and how in this chapter of your life you've ended up repurposing it for storytelling. And I was laughing because it must still feel often like you're shouting into the wind when you're talking about when you're trying to educate the rest of us about your perspective of climate change. And so from me, and I'm sure from all of us, I send you love and encouragement, and keep shouting to the wind. Eventually it'll shout back, and I know it's hard work and important work that you're all doing, and frustrating. So yeah, sending you lots of encouragement. Thanks for having me.
Pardon me. Eden is my neighbor out on Galliano, so I often think she's probably heard my big voice as my neighbor a few hundred feet away from me.
I have. We're not that close neighbors, but I have heard. I have heard. And Rosemary has brothers too.
They aren't as loud as I am.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Thank you for the tech team up there. Hello, tech team, Charlie. Thank you for coming with your Saturday afternoon to spend with us.
Thank you. Thank you up there, everyone.